afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for Ask the Expert, Branding and Design for Your Business Build-Out. My name is Karen Burton, and I am co-founder and CEO of SpaceLab Detroit. We're a shared office, co-working and meeting space community in downtown Detroit, and we also operate a location in Northwest Detroit. We are open. You can find us at spacelabdetroit.com, and we have all of our COVID protocols and guidelines and all of that information on our website. We invite you to join us for a day pass or come down if you need meeting space, or if you just want to get out of the house. We are a community of innovators, people creating smart solutions for our city and our neighbors. We have a lot of our members are in the creative and built environment space. So we have a lot of experts in this area of branding and designing your space. This event is part of Detroit Month of Design. We are proud to continue to be, to partner with Design Core Detroit and to bring these presentations, helping people to create the spaces where we live, work, and play. And we congratulate Design Core on 10 years of Detroit Month of Design. Started out as the Week of Design, and they are doing a fantastic job as being ambassadors for design around the world and representing Detroit very well. So thank you so much, Design Core, for making this happen every year and making it happen this year, even though we can't all get together the way we typically do. We're missing Easter Market After Dark. But we will be back at it next year, I'm sure. So, oh, sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay.
Our presenters today and our experts today, we have Meaghan Berry of Unsold Studio, Kenneth Crutcher of Crutcher Studio, Naomi Beasley Porter of Inspired, and Bryan Cook of Berardi Partners. So I will introduce Meaghan. She is the co-founder of Unsold Studio. Unsold Studio makes businesses and organizations who are in competitive markets stand out with easy to implement, tailored design solutions. So we're talking about building out commercial space today, restaurants, retail, office spaces, other commercial spaces. And I will hand the mic over to Meaghan, and she can tell you more about Unsold Studio and more about the projects that they're working on. And Meaghan, you can just tell me when to advance the slide. And
sure. Well, thanks so much for the lovely intro. I'm Meaghan Berry. I am partner at Unsold Studio. So my business partner, Lillian, it's primarily the two of us, but we've been running the studio since 2013, and we've worked in a lot of retail and kind of small business environments. We really pride ourselves on, we've won 2 Detroit Commerce Design Awards for our work, and we were recently selected as 2020 Notable Women in Design in the City of Detroit by Crain. So we're pretty excited, and we're really grateful that we were asked to be here today. So if you want to advance the next slide, I think for us, you know, we have been working with a lot of businesses for many years at this point, but I chose a few slides to just talk about people who've been impacted primarily by COVID. So for example, this is Spectacle Society, and I should frame too that what we do is branding. So we're not necessarily thinking about the built environment from an architectural or interior design perspective, but we see ourselves as key to telling the story in that space. So we work a lot of the times with interior designers and architects to come together to make sure that the space when someone walks in is going to be a part of the experience, because branding is really not just about your logo, which I think a lot of people think what we do is just a logo and a website. What we're really thinking about is, how do people talk about you? What do they say about you? What's the experience that you provide? And we really think about it as customer experience design, which is called CX design. So for example, Spectacle Society, they're coming to Corktown, right around the corner from Folk. They're a boutique eyeglassware shop. And so her build out got pushed because of COVID. So she'll be opening hopefully by the end of December. But the reason I bring this up is that if anyone has eyeglasses, which it looks like some of you do, you'll be familiar when you walk into an optical place that most of the time it's really high-end fashion photography and it doesn't seem relatable. And so the woman Tina was saying she wanted it to feel neighborhoody and like people could really come in and celebrate who they are. So our solution was to not use photography at this point in time because she didn't have any photography. She didn't have clients yet. So we used illustration and created a set of like 20 different heads, 30 different glasses, 40 different hairstyles, and we can combine into all these different personas to tell that story as she's getting her feet wet in this business. So there's not a lot of pressure to spend money on high-end photography and those types of things. So a good designer will help you to figure out what are solutions that are short-term and what are long-term. Karen, will you hit the next slide for me? Thanks. So we've been doing a lot of really playful businesses recently. So Bombshell Treat Bar similarly was impacted by COVID. So she's a mobile food business that was planning to do events and can't do events right now. So we've pivoted her business to help her get a website running where she can do deliveries. So we're thinking about, how does the brand extend to someone's doorstep now and not just event-based? So all sorts of illustrations and fun, playful types of solutions until she could get photography done, because she couldn't even get people to be models while COVID was going on. So we've really had to start relying on some of these traditional tool sets like drawing and icons, and thinking about how, if we can't set up environments to take photos that feel like it's the brand, what else can we do? Will you keep going, Karen? So our next one, New Order Coffee, was a client that we've had for a very long time. And unfortunately, they were impacted by COVID and closed their Midtown shop. They still have their Royal Oak shop because that one is getting a little bit more traffic for them. But for this business, we've definitely been thinking about, how does social distancing work in their space? How do they communicate that in a friendly way? How does menu design work at a distance? So they've been working on an app for a while to help with mobile ordering, but thinking about, how does a small business afford an app or technology, and how can we use what they can afford in an interesting or smart way? So designers can really help you capitalize on making the most out of what you have in your budget. It really shouldn't be about, when you talk to a designer, I think the fear is that it's going to cost a lot, but really a good designer will help you work within your budget to make the most impact. And then I think the last slide, and then I'll move on to someone else. And then the last one is Citizen Robotics, where they are going to be working kind of in a sister company with Mod Public, which we also did the branding for during this kind of COVID time. And I think Mod Public and Citizen Robotics are thinking about how technology can be used to make housing more affordable. So Citizen Robotics is going to be the nonprofit arm of this. And so what we've been doing with them is really thinking about, similarly, like, they don't have a space yet. This is all kind of trying to get grants and making sure that they've got funding in order to get this off the ground. So a designer can be really good to bring on early. That's something I also want to emphasize in this, is that a lot of people want to wait to hire a designer, but really it's important at the front end. It's your first introduction to your audience and your partners. So if you don't get it right, it can be really hard to reel back that first impression. So for someone like Citizen Robotics, it was really great that they were willing to kind of work with a designer at the beginning in order to hopefully make a lot of impact moving forward. So I'll leave it at that, and then someone else can take over.
Great, Meaghan. Thank you so much. We are going to be doing a presentation soon with Citizen Robotics. I know Tom Woodman, and he's presenting some great technological ideas for affordable housing to the city. So looking forward to that. Thank you, Meaghan. If anybody has questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat, and we will be coming back to those. Thank you, Meaghan. Next, we have Kenneth Crutcher of Crutcher Studio. Ken is a registered architect. He's done quite a bit of work here in the city of Detroit. I've known Ken since our University of Michigan days back in the School of Architecture. So he has some great projects that he's going to show you here in the city. Ken, you want to introduce yourself and your company and maybe talk a little bit about that picture that's behind you as well.
I'm Ken Crutcher, an architect I'm in Farmington right now from Detroit area. As Karen was talking about, that photo behind me is the house I was born in. I just recently ran across through Facebook the grandson of the original architect who designed the house. So it turns out the architect designed the house, his son became an architect. My grandfather bought the house, his son wanted to be an architect, and then I became an architect, all coming out of that house. So there's something about that, I think. My studio I've been in business now coming up on 23 years on my own. I do primarily smaller projects, working with mostly business owners and families, people getting their houses or their businesses started up or expanded. I got a few projects. You want to go to the next slide. This is just a quick, well, actually, this is one of the first projects I ever worked on when I opened up. It's a clothing store. It's no longer in business, but I'm still in touch with the owner, and we've actually talked about doing some of his other ventures. But this is an interior design build out that was branding his store as a denim clothing store. Basically, just with the floor materials and the furniture were the only thing we got a chance to were able to do in this space because of his budget, and we turned it into a runway, like a fashion show runway. He never got eventually got some more display racks, so it looked like you were walking down a crowded runway at a fashion show when it was all set up. But this is when he initially opened. You can go to the next one. This was a cake crumbs. I've got a before and after. It used to be a Coney Island, and I do a lot of work with restaurants and startup restaurants. And one of the things I like to recommend is that they find a spot instead of trying to build out, is building a space that used to be a restaurant, so that the expensive thing of building a kitchen isn't your expense. And this was a Coney Island, and my client actually is Cake Crumbs. They do custom custom cakes and cupcakes, and they also have a sort of like a painting with a twist, but it's with cupcakes. So you can go make cupcakes, have some wine, and then so we made a room for that. And then she's selling her cupcakes all within this what used to be as you can see on the little small picture, that was what it used to look like. And then this is the fun we had with the space. The next one. This is, oops, too fast. Yeah, chili mustard onions. This is another restaurant project. This is a vegan Coney Island restaurant. I think is one of the only ones in the area. That's also been one of the things we got into, is the vegan food service stuff. You see there's a picture of me and Pete, the chef, as we got started. Like I said, this was a build out. It used to also be a Coney Island. And unlike most restaurants where you want to try to keep the kitchen, we basically gutted the building, went down to the bricks, and built out a whole new restaurant. And the smaller picture there is after it's open, and that's pretty much where Pete has been ever since they've been open. They're behind the grill. You can see. Next. This is a salon project I've done where we're just helping them get their permits together. They had already had some ideas of what they wanted to build, but this was in Detroit. This is mostly hair salon. Next one.
think that's it, Ken.
But that was it. Okay.
Yeah. 5. You want to talk a little bit more? You got a little more time. You want to talk a little bit more about any of these?
Well, a lot of the repeat business, like I said, this Yoshi salon is something we did a few years ago, and I just recently got a call from one of the contractors introduced me to another client who's doing another salon because of this project, because we helped them out.
Okay. You've done nail salons and other salon locations in malls and other locations as well, right?
Yeah, we've got a run of doing some nail salons. I got connected with a family that was running them and building them. Actually, their deal was to build them and sell them to other people. So we did about 5 nail salons. This is the third hair salon. We did one for the Motor City Match project. I think it's the only one in town where they specialize in doing a wet shave. So if you've never had a wet shave, which it's a men only thing, I guess. You gotta have a beard to get it shaved off. But but it is a full service hair salon and spa on Livernois. It was just recently completed. The most specialty thing we've done is a shrimp farm. It's the only shrimp farm I don't know if it's in the state of Michigan, but I know in Detroit, but there's on West Chicago, you can actually go purchase fresh caught shrimp, and they're growing it in seawater. So it's, you can't get it any fresher because it literally would be swimming this morning and you can be eating it tonight. That's how fresh it is. That was an interesting project. We turned a printing shop into basically an indoor fish farm.
All right, interesting. I have to go by there and take a look at that one. All of these. Great. So thank you, Ken. Again, if you have questions, if you just joined us, if you have questions, please do put those questions in the chat and we will review those, and we may ask you to unmute yourself and ask those questions. Next, we have Naomi Beasley Porter, graduate of U of D Mercy School of Architecture. She has worked with Hamilton Anderson Architects and Berardi Partners, and now she has her own firm, Inspired.
Thank you, Mrs. Karen.
Inspired Design Studio.
Thank you, Mrs. Karen. Please pardon my husband in the background. He's taking a work meeting as well, and he is not a quiet man. So my name is Naomi Beasley Porter. I am 2 months old, and I am in the process of, really establishing myself and Inspired, and, fine-tuning the services that we'd like to provide based on the experiences that I've had and the experiences that I look to have and the types of projects that I would like to work on. And so currently I am a sole proprietor, but I collaborate also with other sole proprietors and nonprofits to not only just do architectural work, but also some programming and other planning efforts, and really conceptualizing what space could look like, particularly for organizations and clients that don't necessarily know where to start or what they're looking for. So you can go to the next slide. I'm just going to show a couple of projects that I've worked on individually and at previous employers that have really allowed me to get a full circle range of experience. This was a design build program back when pop-ups were a thing, and well, really before the pop-up movement. We had the Jeff Chalmers pop-up series. This was in the summer of 2013, summer 2013. And we had 6 design teams, and we each got a storefront, and we designed and we formulated our teams, and we designed and built out these storefronts to have temporary occupancy for 2 months' time. And I believe that all but one are now occupied, with other tenants, of course. But this was like really my very first project post-graduation, building chandeliers from scratch, building a soffit. I never built a soffit, understanding the implications of doing a a food service area. This is my first introduction into food service design. And so, and literally every piece of wood that you see is a pallet that we dismembered by hand. I think we had taken apart over 300 pallets over the course of 1 month that we had to build it out with a $2,000 budget. Yeah, and that's just an example of, working with, the organizations that are in the community, onboarding businesses that would like to just see what their business could look like, or what it looks like to occupy a space, and then having the unique opportunity to test it in that community. If you can go to the next slide, please. This was a development where a developer contacted Hamilton Anderson, and they were trying to figure out, well, what is possible for our site? What can we do? And so really getting an understanding and really getting my hands in, doing calculations, looking at code and looking at zoning to have a better understanding of what exactly can we do in certain places, and putting numbers to it, and helping and assisting and supporting with pro formas. If you could go to the next slide, please. Excuse me. Uh-oh. Next slide, please, Mrs. Karen. I'm sorry. Okay. ELTON Park Development. Oh, one more back. I'm sorry. ELTON Park Development was another project that I worked on while I was at Hamilton Anderson, and it was a 5 to 6 building, multi-residential with some commercial development. And I had a lot of experience with multifamily housing, which I grew to really enjoy that type of work. And so, taking that experience and now being able to translate that with single family residents, and also, potentially 2 and 4 unit, or, smaller multifamily units, and looking forward to having those opportunities. I have a couple of conversations that are ongoing currently for projects at that scale. Last slide, please. And lastly, Motor City Match and Restore. So while at Berardi, we worked with over 15 business owners that were in and throughout the city of Detroit through Motor City Match and Restore, which was a grant that provided existing businesses the opportunity to reimagine what the exterior of their building could look like. And then with new businesses that were either committed to a location or looking for a location, to see what the potential was for the build out of the interior of their space. And it was a wonderful opportunity, and it really honed in on my love for connecting with people, and then also my love for the city of Detroit in its entirety beyond the 7.2. There's so much invested, and people are so interested in all of the work that's happening in downtown and midtown and New Center, that oftentimes a lot of business owners feel forgotten outside of those areas. And we met so many that were very discouraged about the process, and getting resources, and not really understanding what their options were. And so that opportunity was really wonderful to connect with those people, but also to be with them every step of the way, and really allowed myself and Bryan to kind of craft this process that it could be easily duplicated and altered to pretty much retrofit any business type for a small business in the city. And so, as you can see, we did a couple of exterior concepts for some businesses, and then there was an organization that was looking to do a community center, and they were looking to turn the old, it used to be a Target at the Bel Air Shopping Center at 8 Mile and Van Dyke, and they were looking to build out a community center there. And so reimagining what that could look like for them, with so much square footage, how can we approach the project? And then also always considering their budget and what's feasible for them in the process of designing, and providing options for them, instead of selling them the dream earlier on, like taking their ideas and really really allowing ourselves to be flexible to present them something that was feasible and obtainable and realistic for them.
All right, great. Thank you, Naomi. And that is a great point. Figuring in the budget when you're putting together those images for people to imagine, what their space could look like, so that they get something that's realistic and, as you said, attainable. And then now we have Bryan Cook with Berardi plus Detroit, or Berardi Partners. Thank you, Bryan, for joining us today. Bryan started out practicing architecture on the west side of the state, right? And then you did some work in the automotive industry. Is that correct? And now he's the director of Berardi Partners Detroit office. So Bryan, I'll let you take it from here and tell us some more about yourself and maybe a little bit about NOMA, and then get into your projects.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Karen, and thank you thank you to the Month of Design. This is always a great event. Yeah, so I did start in Detroit. My first job was actually downtown in Detroit, actually literally kitty corner from SpaceLab, which is kind of weird. I've had quite a different experience, and this project right here, hitting on budget, it didn't have one, so we're talking about the life remodeled project. They took over the Durfee School. I guess I'll go through the projects and then I'll talk about NOMA after. Yeah, so it was an existing middle school, and they leased the building from the city, and we came in and helped them to get to occupancy, and it only took them 3 years to get the C of O. So it's been an amazing journey with this project. So if anyone's familiar with Life Remodeled, they're a nonprofit, and they do 6 days of service. And really, Berardi Partners, we look to work with nonprofits on doing multifamily housing. That's the bread and butter. That's the focus of the firm. But here in the Detroit area, we were looking to help. Like, how can we help? Was our motto, and it still is our motto. And how can we help? And that doesn't restrict us to size necessarily. This was one of the first projects we started working on in the office. Was working with Life Remodeled for them to take over this beautiful building that would have been just left vacant had they not taken it over, as all the students were actually going to Central, which is literally like right behind this building. So this was a really interesting project for so many reasons. Budget, expectations, understanding of the process, and we were able to help our client. And even when they didn't want to necessarily hear everything we were saying, it was all important. It was all part of the process in getting there. So this was a very interesting project, and I'm so happy that they rehabbed this. Well, it wasn't that it rehabbed, that they brought back life, and they continued life in this building. So it was a really amazing project to see. So next slide. Yeah, there you go. So,
Sorry about that. Something's going on with this scrolling button on the mouse.
Yeah, no worries. So this is a Motor City Match project. In the bottom right-hand corner there, that's the owner of the space, Marlene Brooks, and she was there with Mayor Duggan as a Motor City Match project that actually got completed, which was it had its challenges. So it's actually a beauty school. So it's one of the I think the only beauty school in the city for like the last, I think, 10 or 20 years. So not only was it Motor City Match, but it was a beauty school. And I think they've just graduated their second round of students. This was a really fun project. So we had to design twice. So that was a really fun challenge. They had a space, and again, so one of the things I make sure to talk to my clients is about their leases and how that's structured, and timing and all that stuff. because the top left corner was the space we ended up in because of the agreement letter had just expired probably about a month by the time, maybe not even that, when we finished the documentation. And then when they went to go start the build, the landlord was like, oh no, this is someone else's space now. And they handed them this space behind the space, and it was really weird shaped, and that was really interesting, some interesting conversations to say the least, but we made it happen with her, and it became a really beautiful project. And now we're seeing, you know, young people, young ladies mostly, you know, getting their beauty education. So that was really amazing project. Next slide. And again, you know, so this is just showing the scale, you know, that I like, you know, showing the scale of what we can do. So we're not limited to something small or something large. Again, this is a restore. This was the one that was Motor City Match, and this is restore. The picture on the right is how it used to look, and the picture on the left is how it looks today. And again, you know, there's, you know, a lot of people don't think that this is, you know, this would be a big project. But what I say to you know, clients is that anytime you do anything with architecture, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for you. It's a big deal for your budget, because you may never do this again. So it's really important to talk through that, to talk about how important, you know, smaller scale things are, because now the whole front door of their, you know, facility has completely changed, and you know, just brings it to today, or at least makes it feel like old, right? At least not into, you know, the 70s where the original vestibule was. So, you know, small things are very important, especially, you know, when you're dealing with architecture, but they do not cost like this. None of this stuff is cheap. So I try to tell any and all of my clients that it's not going to be as cheap as you think, just period, point blank. Oh, someone dived into this oldest animal hospital in the city, or was it the state? I just missed it. I saw it real quick. But yeah, they had just I think celebrated their, was it 100th year over last summer. So yeah, it's amazing. They actually used to treat horses there originally, which blew my mind when they told me that. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, and then next slide. I think it's the last slide. Yeah, this is again back to the larger project. So this is a multifamily mixed use building in Sterling Heights. We're actually working with the Chaldean Foundation to create a project for 130 units in Sterling Heights. Really trying to, it's actually along Van Dyke. Just trying to, and this would be a tax credit project, so affordable housing is available. In conjunction with the foundation, they help a lot of people find housing, and there's just not enough in Sterling Heights. So you know, they actually took it in their own hands to try to move that forward. So we're actually waiting on, hopefully construction starts on this one, maybe not before the end of the year, but maybe before the end of the year. So, but larger projects, 128 units, I think we're at. So yeah, huge project, huge development. And again, none of this stuff happens quickly. A lot of these things take a lot of time to make happen. And really, it's important to really like who you're working with, because like, you know, even with great clients, stuff happens all the time. Like it's amazing how just things just end up happening. But if you have a team that, you know, they'll have an answer. We'll figure out an answer. I think that's critical for any size scope of project, is that you have a team that you can call on and say, hey, there's an issue. How do we fix this? And they help you fix it. So yeah, that was that project. I think, was that my last one, Karen? I think so this was the last one. So this was a conceptual design for a nonprofit here in the city. They were looking to do all kinds of things: workforce training, childcare facility, all kinds of educational pieces, you know, and actually in the neighborhood. So, you know, created a design that was completely different than anything that was going on in that neighborhood, and bring something different to draw people there. So, you know, bring attention to it, and, you know, allow people to learn and train as that was the vision of the owner in this one. So yeah, and on that point, the last I'll hit on NOMA. So I've been a part of NOMA since 2012. National Organization of Minority Architects. Karen is part of it. Naomi's part of it. Ken's part of it. You all can be a part of it. I always implore you to become members. Our big thing is to bring more young people of color into the profession. The last 6 years, we've done over 10 free architecture camps for high school and middle school students across the state. This year we did our first virtual one, and it was extremely successful. We had over 30 students a part of it, and they were from all across the state. They were from, I think we had New Orleans, we had Jamaica, not New Orleans, I'm sorry. We did Texas, North Carolina, so all over, because we had a virtual one this year. But we're hoping to get back to, in person next year. We're hoping to do 3 camps. We were doing, next year. So at the very least, back in Detroit, Kalamazoo, and Grand Rapids. So, hopefully we can get back to in person, but if not, we'll do it virtual, and, we'll still interact with the kids. So, yeah.
All right, Bryan, thank you. I just thought we would highlight NOMA just for a minute there and let people know what NOMA is doing here in the city, and to bring younger people into the architecture profession. Just quickly, Bryan, I want to go back to this project, which Jamie wrote in the chat that this is the oldest animal hospital in the country.
Oh,
amazing, right here in Detroit. But I just want to highlight, what you did with this space, something very kind of basic, but you made this entrance beautiful. But notice, those of you who are working on your business build out and redesigning your business or building something new, that here the door, and the before image, the door is over on the side, and it may be pretty hard to navigate when people are walking there. They may not know how to get in, and you put the door right here in the front so people can see it, and it seems to be a more welcoming entrance to the building. So that's also a shout out to Motor City Restore, who, they made funds available to businesses in the city so that they could do things like this and make their businesses more welcoming. All right. So we're going to get into questions now. Is Liz Gandhi on, or some representative of K9 to 5? Liz submitted some questions. I know she was going to be out of town, but she was going to try to be on. And we'll wait a second and see if they need to unmute, if there's a representative from K9 to 5. If not, Devin, I see you're on. Devin Malloy has a new business, Tav Bagels. Devin, if you would unmute yourself.
Hi, Karen, and hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thank you so much for sharing all of these projects. It's definitely an inspiration.
Sure. I'm going to stop sharing my screen too.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll get into the questions.
I'm here with Joe, who is one of our co-founders. There's one more of us who is elsewhere right now, but we are a bagel shop. We started in about February, I'd say, back when we were still working out of SpaceLab. Some of the earliest versions of our bagels made our way there.
They smelled great too. I remember you heating them up.
We are carefully considering a number of areas throughout the city as we're looking for where our sort of permanent home could be, and definitely taking into consideration the fact that foot traffic is a really important part of being a small business. And so we're hoping to design a space that makes sense, both from a window shopping perspective, but also sort of in a post-COVID world, but also in a COVID world where the foot traffic patterns throughout the city are so different than they were when people were commuting downtown, and not really sure how that's going to impact foot traffic long-term. And so we're just curious how we should weigh designing and making design decisions for this moment versus considering the long-term, and also how do you see foot traffic being impacted in the long term, and how is that going to impact the experience of visiting a small business throughout the city.
One of our experts want to take that one or start? We can have more than one answer.
I'm not an architect, but I can start maybe thinking about like from a branding perspective. So I think for you guys, no matter what happens, you have to be comfortable being able to pivot your business, right? So whether it's, you know, doing brick and mortar, but also maybe delivery or catering for a while. I think, you know, do you start with a commissary kitchen where you're actually like having less of a space for sitting and eating inside? Like, I think those are some of the things that no matter what you end up doing, your branding just needs to be consistent for your clients so they trust the experience, no matter how they're experiencing your bagel shop, is going to be the same great bagel that they've come to expect. And I would also say that, you know, I'm sure you guys are aware that, you know, Detroit Institute of Bagels closed in Corktown. And I think for you guys, when you're opening, there's clearly a gap, you know, in that neighborhood, but they closed for a reason. So it'd be interesting to think about them as a case study and, you know, what they were doing and what maybe wasn't working. Because I think a lot of people with their designs, they look at their competition and think like, we have to be like our competition, when in fact you should sometimes set yourself apart and do the exact opposite of what your competition was doing. So those are my 2 cents. I'm not an architect, but we do have clients who deal with foot traffic and those types of things. And I think the online space for you guys, mobile orders are going to be huge forevermore. I think we've gotten really comfortable with that curbside delivery and things, at least I have as a consumer.
Thank you, Meaghan. You're not an architect, but you're a branding expert. And that's why we wanted to have you on here.
I'm married to an architect, so I hear a lot of it at home as well. So I'll try to rep for Fernando as best I can.
So yeah, I think that's great. You look at the business holistically, the online experience, and how does that tie in with the in-person experience? Great.
Yeah, one of the questions that I would ask of you if you came to me was, you know, what do you want to do? How do you want to proceed? Like, what kind of experience do you want your clients to have? And if you're really interested on the foot traffic, okay, go, you know, maybe you have to drive around the city and see where people are actually still walking around during the day or at the times that you're anticipating. You know, that's one tip. And then also, you know, like Meaghan said, you know, just being able to pivot. I know I talked with a couple of my Motor City Match clients through COVID, and we talked about expanding their business model or modifying their business model to open it up more for, you know, future planning. Or, you know, maybe you're setting yourself to a smaller space to, you know, to be somewhere that you really want to be, or it has to do with manufacturing, you know. So there's a lot of factors into what what decisions you're making. So it really does. The first step is, what do you guys want? Obviously to make money and sell bagels, but I mean, like, you know, how do you see yourself growing from where you are and where you want to, and what approach do you think is going to be the most successful in doing that? And then we can help, you know, kind of leverage that in terms of design, it being flexible in what you're trying to do.
I would like to add some possible strategies and solutions for you both.
This is Victoria Bell.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm still in my pajamas. So yeah, you're not going to see me today. So Iggy's Eggies has partnered with Treat Dreams in downtown Detroit. So it's, you walk up and you make your order. The menu is on the outside of their kitchen. And yeah, they're doing quite well in downtown Detroit right now. In addition, there's like a little, I want to say it's custard ice cream across from where Wright and Company is before you get to the little alleyway where Shinola Hotel is. So maybe you could partner with them. That's a possibility, right? Or there's also the Chickpea and the D space that seems to have gone unused. I don't know if he's still in the area or what's happening, but there's a lot of like flipping and twisting and turning that's going on in the downtown area. So just pay attention to what is going on just by observation for the most part. There was something else though, like if you're selling bagels, try partnering with like Mad Cat Coffee. See if you can sell some out of there or some of the other small coffee shops that are in the area. I want to say Desert Oasis might be able to, like, you know, come into cahoots with you for a little bit. So think out of the box first, and then scale up slow but surely.
That's great. So, Devin, you guys currently have you're operating in Ferndale, right? You have a space in Ferndale?
Yeah, so we operate sort of out of a
Thank
commissary kitchen situation where we're using a current restaurant when they're not using their kitchen. So that's like our current model, which has been working really well until we both need things at the same time and then it's not. So we're definitely eager to kind of get our own space, and that was all very helpful. So thank you.
Okay. Yes, and thank you, Vic, for giving those recommendations as well. Devin, you want to ask another question?
I was going to ask that one of the things we're thinking about is that bagel shops typically are only open in mornings for breakfast, obviously, and we're thinking about ways to utilize the space for more hours in the day. And so we've thought about having sort of an evening bar that had wine or cocktails or something as well. And so I would wonder if you guys have any suggestions on how you design a space with multiple uses, especially considering that the atmosphere of a breakfast spot is very different than a bar, for example, even if it is sort of like a cocktail bar. So yeah, I would wonder what sort of advice you have for designing a space like that.
So I think there's examples of a similar model that have been successful in the city, right? You have Canelli's, I think that's how you pronounce it. They're in downtown, where they're a pastry shop and they open at 6 a.m. and they also, you know, have lunch, so they have salads. And so I think it's really a matter of there was another example that I had and I don't remember. Avalon. Avalon in downtown is a perfect example of a model that you're looking to emulate. And even when Avalon, before Avalon had the downtown store, they still had their location in Midtown, where they there was duality in them always offering these sorts of foods, you know, these to-go foods, and having a space for people to sit and take meetings and have coffee. And then also it be interactive, right? That people can watch people literally make the breads and the desserts and things. So it really just, it's a matter of what you plan to, like how you see the space functioning at these different moments in the day. Does it shut down at lunchtime and open back up for dinner? Is it from morning to, like, is it early dinner? So it's really a larger part of that would really be you flushing out what that looks like for you. And it's really obtainable. It's just a matter of, again, you fine-tuning what you want to do and then finding a space that can accommodate it. And another way, and I know like it's trending now that people are doing, you know, ghost kitchens, or, you know, they're having these kitchens that other smaller companies can rent out your kitchen space. So even if you say, okay, I don't want to, maybe like being open and offering other things besides bagels doesn't work for us, but maybe to offset the cost of the space, that we can rent it out, or we can do provide the opportunity for other chefs or other smaller restaurateurs to do ghost kitchens. Or even if you test it out yourself as a participant of something like that, right? But I think the space will really be determined by that, in addition to, like you said, foot traffic earlier. And I think the question in particular was more so about foot traffic in COVID. And as because right now everyone is so cooped up and we're indoors and everyone's kind of at home, and people want things to go to. People want things to do where they feel safe. And so also we're designing in, a COVID world. So, finding a space that allows itself to be big enough to allow for proper social distancing, where you don't have these gaps of booth seating. So if you go to a restaurant now, they're seating people every 2-3 booths. And so there's wasted real estate there. So, finding also space that can accommodate those types of things as well.
I had a question. I was
Go
gonna
for
say,
it.
you're talking about the multi-use of the space. Are you talking about something with bagels would be morning, noon, and night bagels, or bagels in the morning and something else in the evening? Because that would inform you a lot about how you would design or what the needs of the space are. If you were to have a bagel product that pairs well with some wines or some scotch or bourbon, then I'd be interested. And maybe it's a different type of product. There's a breakfast bagels, or maybe there's a cocktail bagel and that's what you become known for. Now you got a reason, and now you don't have to worry about the foot traffic, because now you're a destination. Because where else can you go to get cocktail bagels?
Yeah, one of the drivers of the idea actually was that you can pretty easily make pizza bagels, and obviously a lot of us have had those as kids, but with sort of like a gourmet bagel or like a nice bagel shop bagel, the pizza bagels are actually delicious. And so you can definitely
or even bagel chips on a charcuterie board.
Yeah,
there's a lot of different ways.
There's a few different options to like do the same sort of food, but do it in the evening for a different cuisine or vibe, I guess. And then adding in an ability to have like cocktails or some alcohol option obviously makes it a lot more financial sense to be open at night as well then. So
The thought would be the concern in your kitchen. You want to have your kitchen flexible enough that you can do not just making bagels, but now making stuff with the bagels. And that's two different types of kitchen requirements. But then you can add alcohol to anything. So that's
true.
Okay,
also just
making me hungry. Go ahead, Meaghan.
I'd be really cautious too of how you brand the day and the evening experience, because otherwise there can be a really big disconnect. So a good example of someone who is kind of struggling with this is La Feria in Detroit. So the owner, we've been speaking to him, where they basically have the tapas bar. It's a shared building with a doorway in the middle. And so they have a wine bar that they opened on kind of the left side, and then the tapas bar on the right. And even though they're owned by the same company and they kind of want to be seen together, they got branded separately. And so it creates a lot of confusion for the customers. So they might like the wine bar, but not know that the tapas bar is the same thing. And so I would just say for you guys, be really mindful of how you're thinking of that evening experience, so that the people in the morning aren't alienated by the evening and vice versa. You don't want to create any confusion. So it might be okay to kind of own this like fun pizza bagel, like casual feeling, rather than trying to be, something else. And then just because Kiana has requested it, I want to make sure that people see, I mentioned Sfumato, which is a fragrance place, which I know is different because they're not doing food during the day, but they have basically a really smart small space design where they have product by day and then the fragrances pair with the cocktails at night. And so I think that their space design is a great example of how you can convert a space to be really flexible by day and by night. But the branding of that also goes together, because this idea of fragrance and taste going together with cocktails. So how can you guys make sure, again, that that is a seamless experience, even if they are seemingly different?
That may also be something going forward. It's talking about this COVID considerations. With most businesses you set up like with the bagels, you may set up for a breakfast or breakfast lunch kind of thing, or some other restaurant may be a lunch dinner thing or dinner only, and a bar is usually going to be an evening thing. Well, because of the businesses now not able to have the crowds that they would normally have in their businesses, there may be an opportunity now for things that operate over a wider operating range. So the bagel place, you can come in and get a bagel for breakfast and come and get one for lunch, and have a bagel and wine for dinner with some wine as a cocktails. And if you're out all night long, just wake up the next morning and you go right back to the bagel place. Now you've got something that can happen. It's not large groups of people at any one time, but the same amount of people spread out over a longer period of time.
Great,
Thank you.
great,
That's really
That makes
helpful.
sense. Yeah, thank you.
great answers. Thank you, everyone. And Vic also put in the chat, she mentioned Great Lakes Coffee. They have the coffee and also the wine bar. So that may be something you want to take a look at.
Well, Starbucks is experimenting with doing a wine and alcohol
Right.
in their places as well. So,
Right.
like I said, alcohol goes with everything, so it's okay.
So yeah, take a look at the chat. I'm going to introduce some of the questions from K9 to 5 also. But Prima Kadir, if you could unmute yourself, and you said you had a question, and if anyone else has a question, please just let us know in the chat area and we'll ask you to unmute so you can ask. Go ahead, Prima.
Thank you. I have a friend who, before COVID, entered into a deal for a property. She was going to teach yoga there. And then, of course, you know, with COVID happening, she wasn't able to open. She has cabinetry that she doesn't know what to do with. Is there some place that she could, I don't know, sell it, find a buyer?
Was it cabinetry for the yoga studio?
Yeah.
I just talked to someone who's trying to open a yoga studio. I can see they're interested.
Okay.
Prima, put your contact information in the chat. We'll make sure that Ken gets it so he can pass that
thank you.
information on. Okay, thank you for that question. Anyone else have questions about their commercial build out before we move on to some from K9 to 5? All right, so K9 to 5 has a couple of locations there in Midtown and Ferndale. They're a provider of dog boarding, dog daycare, grooming, and training services. So the owner, Liz Bondi, contacted us and asked, what does a small business opening multiple locations need to know about brand consistency between locations? And I'd like to know that as well, because we have a couple locations.
Well, I guess as the brand person, I'll go first on this one. So I would say that every location demands a little bit of a different thing, right? So an audience in Midtown is going to be different than in Southwest, or, you know, there's just, even though we have these neighborhoods, the audiences have different needs. And also sometimes your locations might, you know, have services that they are promoting more than others. So one might be the grooming, you know, much more grooming heavy, one might be more dog boarding heavy. So I think that it's important to understand why you're in certain locations versus others and what makes those unique. But with that said, I think that if you work with a brand team like myself and Lillian, we create what's called brand style guidelines. So it's basically like your Bible for your brand that you follow, and it has a rule system, and it should be flexible enough that you can add multiple locations to that tag, or you can have what we call consistency without redundancy, because you want to make sure that people feel like when they go into the space, they know, oh, it's K9 to 5. But the people in Ferndale should feel like it's their K9 to 5. It's not just some like thing that got placed there with no consideration for the local neighborhood. So there's this really fine balance of like, how can we make sure that there's a little bit of customization to the brand while still being true to it? So a brand team like us will figure out a system of design that is meant to grow with you. So when we designed, for example, New Order Coffee, we knew their goal was to have multiple locations. So we made sure that we were mindful that that brand was not so rigid that if we needed to add more sites, it could grow with it. I think that answers the question, I hope.
It does.
Okay.
It does. Thanks. I kind of think about Chipotle. Chipotle has several locations. When you walk in, you feel like you're in a Chipotle, but they aren't exactly the same. All right, so that's similar.
Yeah, that goes to banking things. It goes on to the design elements being components. that you can move around, pick and choose, and some things fit in some places and not in others. But because you're talking about the branding thing, you go into McDonald's, you can go into McDonald's almost anywhere in the world, and it feels like it's your neighborhood McDonald's. It's not anything specific or site specific or country specific, really. It's they just have the same stuff everywhere. Or you can go to someplace like Chipotle where everyone is a little different, but yet they're all the same, because if you look, the tables are the same, the stuff hanging on the wall is the same. Another good example is a Fridays restaurant. You go into Fridays, every one of those is different, but they're all the same kind of stuff. So you're talking about a dog grooming place. You know, you want to think, do you want to have something that's that neighborhood specific? And this is going to be just a business decision, but do you want it to be a location specific, or do you want it to be brand specific? Meaning, do you want them to walk into any of these places and know it's the same kind of place, or do you want them to walk into the one in their neighborhood and know it's different from the same name in a different neighborhood? And I think those are just two different design approaches and how you would develop the details and components, signage, the fixtures you pick, the fonts you use in your packaging, the chairs you choose, those kind of things, you know, wind up being a design decision you have to make, but you have to also have that strategy of what you're trying to be, so we can, you know, make that work with it.
And similar to what Meaghan said, you know, architects, either just the architect or working with an interiors person, pending if you would like to have an interiors person on board, can really work together to also create a style guide. Starbucks has their own interior architectural and design team because they have a style guide. There's a minimal standard in place as it pertains to finishes and quality and certain things that can, you know, have different applications, but it's still consistent throughout. And, you know, they have, you know, urban stores, they have the more suburban stores, and I don't know if you pay attention to when you go to these different places, but the design of a Starbucks in the city is different than the design of a Starbucks in the suburbs versus the design of the Starbucks in Seattle, where they actually have a restaurant and a tasting room and all of these other components. I went to the Woodward Meyer store today at Beaumont, and it's a completely different store from Meyer, just in aesthetics. But once you're shopping the store, it's the same quality of the product and all these other things. But I don't know if they're looking to do multiples of those, or even when you go to Whole Foods, which is nationally, you can tell that you're in a Whole Foods aesthetically, but it's still very different, and it's retrofitted to that particular location. The one in Chicago, the one in Detroit, the one, you know, that we have in even the one in Troy. So, and that's really, and I will say, a lot of people shy away from those types of services when they look at the price, but the reality is that something like that is longer serving, and there's duality. So it's not to say that you can't find reasonable and feasible architectural and design services. However, when you are planning for something at a larger scale, or something that will serve dual, like have multiple purpose, of course you're going to have to get architectural drawings with every new building, because no building is the same. But when you invest in those types of services earlier on, a style guide, an interior, like, you know, some type of those types of packages and services, there's an unseen value in it initially, but having an understanding of what the value of that is long term, especially if you're looking to have multiple locations.
Excellent point. Yeah, when you invest in that upfront, that lasts, you know, that's a long-lasting branding investment. And as was discussed before, you can take those elements not only in your physical space, but you can carry those over to your website and your online space and your mailers and things like that. Just a couple more questions from K9 to 5, and they're kind of COVID related. And
there's a question in the chat. I'm sorry, Ms. Karen. I don't know if people have time constraints, but there is one question in the chat.
Which one? From Michael?
Yes.
Yep, I'm going to get to Michael. Go ahead, Michael. We'll go ahead.
You want to start with mine? Okay.
Yep,
So
go ahead.
this question is actually from my sister-in-law, Mina, and I don't know why her phone is popping up as my name. I sent her the
okay.
invite through my phone, so maybe that's why. But her question is, she's been trying to open up a coffee shop for years, and she wants to ask the panel what she would need to get started. And I would like to kind of hijack that question a little bit and extend a little bit more in terms of branding. I think that in this Fiverr world that we're living in, a lot of people want to do branding things first. So A, to answer her question to the panel, but B, at what point when people are getting started, should they start thinking about branding?
I think first you should get Michael's checkbook.
Good.
Well, I would say that for branding, especially in the coffee shop business, which is such a competitive space, there's coffee shops almost, you know, in most neighborhoods at this point. So you have to really think about what's going to set you apart, what makes your coffee shop important. And I think to Michael's point, like Fiverr or these kind of online design services, it's not collaborative. They're not talking to you. They don't really care about you at all. It's this, having a designer is a relationship. It's having someone who's really there to be your advocate. You know, I lose sleep at night when my clients' businesses don't do well. Like that's my stress. So you're not going to get that for paying $5. So for me, I think branding needs to come first because we're there to help you bring your vision to life. So, and I don't mean that in terms of like, I'm your hands that just click the mouse, but I'm there to use my expertise to say, okay, your competitor is this person and this person. This is what they're doing. So your strategy is going to be X, Y, and Z. So I think there's no like, and again, branding doesn't have to be super crazy to start, but it's really making sure you have a great foundation. Because if you don't, I think as Naomi had mentioned, like you're kicking yourself later, like, oh, I wish I just invested because now it's really expensive to redo all our signage and to rebrand and to reintroduce ourselves. And so I would just be very mindful that branding with someone that you can have a conversation with, that yes, it's going to cost more upfront, is going to take you a lot further longer, and they're going to meet your needs much better than anyone else on the internet that you hire can, just, you know, for a templated design.
And to that, going back to, you know, you pay for what you get. So often smaller businesses, they are looking at the dollar value earlier on. And speaking more particularly about architectural services, and it's true, you pay for what you get for. If you hire someone who's going to do a really inexpensive set of architectural drawings for you, and oh, we're going to do our own MEP because you only need the minimum to get through permits. And then once you get into construction, you realize that, you know, like, oh my gosh, this isn't a full set of drawings. Oh my gosh, we actually needed to hire a kitchen consultant because this person who has typically just done spatial planning is not a professional for kitchen consultants, particularly when you have, you know, like a coffee shop or a bar or something like that. And so it's just to reiterate and hone in on paying for the services up front, because I know that it hurts when you see the sticker price and all of those things, but you end up paying for it on the back end, because at some point it's either going to halt your construction. If you are financing or if you have a mortgage, you're paying, or your lease, the property owner wants to collect their rent at a certain point. They're only giving you a certain amount of months for build out before, you know, you start to have to pay rent, all of these other things that can cost you more money in the long run. And typically, I would say a greater portion of delays in projects is because someone went with the cheaper architect or someone went with the cheaper designer, and it cost them more money in the long run, either to redo things, halting work, to have, you know, more new drawings, or bring on a particular consultant, or whatever the case may be. So for the person that's looking to start the coffee shop, assemble a team now, or hire someone who has a team behind them, and just, you know, look to their expertise. Like you're paying for expertise. You're not paying for just to get by. People are charging those prices for a reason.
Yeah.
You also want to consider.
Go ahead, Ken.
So you also
And
want to
then
consider
Bryan.
when talking to a designer about your space before you commit to the space, because like Naomi was talking about, some of that design affects your bottom line in terms of how much product, how many customers you can have, how much product you can prepare, how much product you can store. So you want to also talk with a design professional before, so so he can advise you what kind of space you should be looking for, because you don't want to get locked into a space that's too small. Now you can't do all the things you need to do in it in order to make money, or you wind up with a space too large and it's too big and you will never be able to do what you want to do and make enough money to cover the rent, or you wind up with a space that's not configured or not in the right location. There's a lot of those factors that, and I say that because I do a lot of work with clients who they've already signed a lease or purchased a building and now they're locked into it, and it's like, well, my first advice is we need a different building because this just isn't going to work for you. But now you're committed and you got to go make it work. So have that conversation with the designer up front. I think that it probably goes the same with the branding as well. You want to have a conversation about what kind of coffee shop you are. I mean, are you just selling coffee? Are you selling a coffee experience? Are you going to have is it a morning thing? Is it an afternoon thing? Is it an all day thing? Is it local coffees? Is it exotic coffees? Are you going to have alcohol with your coffee? I guess everybody see where we're going with this one. But, are you going to have other food product with your coffee? Are you going to partner with someone to get food? Are you going to cook food, make food yourself? All those things are questions you probably want to think about as you're getting started, because if you plan on doing it in the future, you want to put the steps in or start making the steps towards what you ultimately will be doing. Like I say, if you ultimately want to do coffee and lunch, don't get into a little small hole in the wall place with just doing coffee, because you'll never get a kitchen in the space. But at the same time, you don't want to get a big space with a full-blown kitchen and all you're going to do right now is coffee. But if you think about some kind of growth, part of the growth plan could be you're in this space for 5 years and then now you got to go someplace else at the next level.
Bryan?
Yeah, I'm just gonna offer the unfun, real answer to this question, and that's what's your pro forma look like? How are you making money? Like, that's really the first question, because I need to know what your budget is. And yeah, you go, okay, well, I don't know I don't know how to figure out my budget. Well, I was like, well, okay, what are you doing? Right? Selling something, doing something. How often do you think you're gonna be getting that return? What's your profit? And then how much can you afford to pay back for a loan? With kitchens, they're way more expensive. The square footage, you got to think about square footage cost for a kitchen versus regular build out. It's like triple. It's like triple the cost. So, hey, just, for an exercise, if you say throw $350 a square foot at the space you're looking at or thinking about, it's a good way to start a budget. And again, probably high when it actually nuts and bolts, but like you need to start thinking about those numbers, at being higher and not lower. And that's usually what gets people in trouble, because they get into it thinking, oh, well, yeah, I'm going to do this for like 30,000, and it's not an existing kitchen. You've never done it before. And I can tell you right now, you probably won't even get the design services for something like that. So, commercial kitchens, it's more expensive for everyone involved to do. There's just a lot more to detail, a lot more to coordinate. And not to say that, non-kitchens are not, but like that's the kind of stuff that you got to be, whenever you're selling food, it's going to come at a premium to you up front. So you got to run those numbers. And that's really the real answer to this. But it helps to talk to someone like an architect, because then we can help size, okay, for what you're talking about. Well, maybe you're, to what Ken's saying, like if you can answer some of those questions, then maybe we can help. But yeah, there's so many cases where people have gotten themselves into a space and, you're not even zoned for this. It becomes an issue. So pro forma is number one, and then figure out a general idea what you want to do, to me, is number two.
I think that to follow up with that, Bryan, I know made a good point earlier on about doing the design and design guidelines, those design manuals. When someone's doing that for their business, and if you're starting out small, you think about the investment. it's based on the amount of money or the kind of money in return or revenue that's going to be generated. And that comes from, like Bryan said, the pro forma. And these companies like Chipotle and McDonald's, you look at their design guides, their manuals, it's a thick document that they spend millions of dollars putting together. But then in their industry, the company's making billions of dollars a year. So think about Starbucks coffee shop. They're just selling coffee and some pastries. Their design guide is a pretty thick document because there's a lot of stuff they have to follow, not just in the graphics, but also in just in the design of the stores. And to get into a Starbucks store takes, you know, tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that stuff started. So, you know, and that all comes from knowing what your business, not just how much money you're going to be making off of it, but how much revenue, how much debt can it support? So, you know, if the only revenue coming in is going to be your salary, that, you know, you may need to go back and revisit that, because if you're not covering your salary and staff salary and the rent and supplies and maintenance and, you know, all these other things, if that those don't work into your business plan, you know, you're destined to fail. Not to scare you or anything, but that's just.
And one more thing I'd like to add to that, something that we frequently saw and heard as an issue is, you know, people bringing on designers after they've signed a lease or after they've purchased a building. And if you're not going to purchase a building, when you purchase a building, you have the intention of overall gutting this building. Most likely, you're going to be responsible for all of the costs for all of your mechanical, your electrical, your plumbing. But when you are looking to rent or lease a space and you're going to be a tenant, it's important, and honestly, something I highly recommend is you always have an architect on hand, so that you can, and then also a good lawyer, so that you can determine what your white box is. Oftentimes, these property owners, they tell you, oh yeah, we'll give you a white box space. But what does a white box space look like? Does that include an updated electrical? Does that include, an accessible restroom that can minimally accommodate, general occupancy? What does white box look like? And I think having an architect on hand earlier on in the process really helps to kind of mitigate those additional costs that you don't foresee. So like a perfect example, there was one Motor City Match awardee who got to Buildout, and they didn't really spell out exactly what white box was in their lease agreement. And they had gotten so far along in the process, and when it came time to put in all of the mechanical systems, there was an issue with the panel that the property owner had provided. And that was an extra $30,000 for the tenant, because per the lease agreement, the property owner had provided a white box space. And they have the capacity to put in a minimal panel that can provide for the service or, the business that you are looking to. So there's always give and take with those types of agreements, but just having someone on hand who has the expertise and the knowledge to really help you navigate your lease agreement as well is something that I highly recommend for entrepreneurs that are going out, that are looking to lease a space or don't really know where to start. Honestly, an architect and a good lawyer is the first place.
All great answers. And I would say, if you're starting a business, that budget is critical, as Bryan brought up, and build in some contingency in there, because you're going to go over budget for sure. But also go online and Google the type of business that you want to start. So if you want to start a coffee shop, Google business plans for coffee shops so you can get some ideas on what those look like. Start putting together your business plan, and then talk to some coffee shop owners, some who are not your direct competitor. Maybe you have to go to another state and take a look at some coffee shops and talk with the owners. But get an idea from them, what's working and what's not.
Karen, do we have enough time for the
Yeah.
Naya's
Do we
question.
have any other questions from people online?
I
So
actually just had another comment in regards to the coffee shop.
Go ahead, Greg.
I'm a fan of bootstrapping, so if you're not already selling coffee, I put a link into the chat. It was about these two college-age ladies who had a cart mate in Eastern Market, and they sell coffee out of that. And they've done extremely well. So you might have to start off really, really small and
With the
source your
kiosk.
coffee locally, buying from Great Lakes, buying from Desert Oasis, and then kind of putting your own spin on it. So if you're not already doing it, try to make sure that if you're not using like your own personal income, which is not recommended, try selling some stuff first and then move up to what everybody else is talking about.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of bootstrapping, that kind of thing, especially for that kind of thing. Let the business pay for itself. You can start small like that. You're selling a couple cups of coffee. Next thing you know, you're selling a couple pots of coffee. Next thing you know, you're selling a couple cases of coffee. Next thing you know, you got a little corner shop somewhere, and you got do all this with zero debt because the company, the business pays for itself.
You could also start out of one of the business incubators. There's Bamboo that's getting ready to open up in Royal Oak.
SpaceLab Detroit.
Yes, and SpaceLab, of course. I don't know about you guys' coffee offerings.
We have great coffee.
we got great coffee starting right now.
We've always had great coffee.
But we have a question from I think it's Naya. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, but I'll just read it from the chat. For most small business that I know, construction and design are the reason they are in so much debt. Speaking of debt, what are some feasible cost-cutting methods?
Oh, not really about cost cutting. It's about getting the right budget. Things are going to cost money, and most people get into debt because they don't have the money in the first place, and it becomes a problem because the business can't support the debt that they're going to need. You think about it, you know, these casinos, they build these buildings, they cost hundreds of millions of dollars. They're not crying about spending the money because the casino's making the money. So these smaller businesses, you know, just you have to look at what it is you're doing, what kind of revenue you're generating, so that when you get into debt, it's a debt that you can handle. You don't want to get into a small shop and have $1 million worth of debt if your business is only doing a $20,000 or $30,000 a year business. That's what gets people into trouble.
And in addition to looking at, instead of just looking at your revenue, look at your expenses and what can you cut. If you're spending a lot of money on, say, internet service, can you find a different internet provider that charges less?
But I think your question was talking about the construction costs.
Oh, I'm sorry, construction and design.
Yeah, you know, you're talking about those costs. Well, you know, one of the ways to cut costs, I think it was Mies van der said this. You need to build less building. You know, it's one of the things. Maybe you're just building too much. You may want to have the huge 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 square foot space, but your budget, your bottom line says you need 500 square feet. You know, you got to look at those numbers, and that also gets people into a lot of trouble. Is their costs. They think things are way expensive because they want this nice big thing, but they don't have the revenue to support it, and then that's when it costs too much. If you have a budget, we can work with your budget. Just you got to be upfront and honest about what that budget actually is, so we can actually do something realistic with it.
We'll start small and make the best of that small space, and then grow.
Yep. No shame in starting small.
With our clients, we talk about a priority list and a wish list. So what we do is we identify within their budget, sometimes if we do hourly, for example, what are the things that are priority? What is going to make the most impact? And we work on those things first. And if we have time left over, we'll move on to wish list items. But I also think, to echo Karen's point, sometimes you have to recognize when you don't need the Rolls Royce, right? Like, I don't need the Rolls Royce of website right now. I don't need this really, really fancy seating. Like, what are the things that you can live without? And really think about, I just need a car to get me from point A to B right now, and I can upgrade later. So making sure that you're being really mindful of not just wants and desires, but really what is the need that's going to create the most impact at the very base level of your business. That would be my best advice of cutting costs. What's a need versus a want?
And so to that, in a nutshell, just project phasing. Honestly, if you're, and again, it goes back to what Bryan said, having a pro forma that works, having an understanding of what you can spend, and then having someone that you're working with that is going to give you an honest design, and that is going to be something that is constructible and buildable and feasible for you. Which is why it's important early on to bring someone to do the branding and the design early on, so that you're having the honest conversations. If you want expensive wallpaper and you don't know the cost of that wallpaper per square footage, but you're bringing on someone, and maybe wallpaper is phase 2, like right now, maybe it's just a matter of getting it up and running for the first 6 to 12 months to recoup some of the costs, and then you do phasing. And if it's cheaper that way, and so you can work with an architect and then maybe bring on a GC so that you can determine what is a priority now and what can be a priority later. Does it make more sense to shut down for 4 weeks, in 12 months to do phase 2 and really make the building what you want it to be? And so oftentimes a lot of people want to do everything all at once. And then again, also, a lot of people either want to do it on their own, or they're going to go with the cheapest person that gives them a proposal. And so oftentimes they're spending a lot more money on the construction and design again earlier on, because they didn't properly plan or didn't bite the bullet earlier on to pay for the quality design service and contracting and construction.
As an example, that the cake crumbs bakery I did, I was work with my client for years. She was looking for spaces, and every time she looked at a space, a nice location, and this will be a great spot, but we got to build out a kitchen, so it's $150,000-$250,000 build out. And she's like, well, that's way too much money. I just didn't have that kind of money to build out. So I was advising her, look for the restaurant space. So she found a space that was a restaurant. They had just moved out. Everything was in place. And she built that place out for, I don't think she spent $100,000 on the whole thing. And that was everything. She moved in there. I mean, it was just a way, way, way less just by picking the right space. And it was a larger space than all the other ones she had been looking at. So you met just that kind of planning and just being aware of, things cost, and depending on the business, just got to picking the right business, the right building, the right space. We can definitely help you with that.
Or even now, like a perfect example is Good Cakes and Bakes. So I know that they're currently shut down and they're doing some upgrading to their space, but they've been operating for 7-8 years now. And so, they built a rapport, they've put themselves out there, they've, made X amount of dollars, and now it's feasible for them to take this time out to shut down operations to make the space everything that they want it to be. And so sometimes it's okay, and they have the space, they're just retrofitting it now to be exactly what they want it to be. And so sometimes that's okay too, if it's feasible, if you're to have all of the space and just do what you have to do to get yourself operating, and then you can circle back later. And like I said, working with a good team earlier on really just makes all of those things that much more seamless. It's never going to be seamless, but it makes it easier.
And to Ken just said, and architects have a hard time showing our value as a dollar amount. But Ken just said he saved his client over $100,000, like by just making a suggestion, like, no, oh, you don't have the money? Find a restaurant that's empty. He just saved his client $100,000. So it's important to have good team members around you, because at the end of the day, you don't really know how much money we can help you save, because of what we know. So, you know, you got to find someone like him, right? Or someone like us, right? To help you out, and just giving you good advice. You know, sometimes I love answering questions that I don't have to draw anything for. If I can help you out, I don't have to draw anything. I mean, yeah, okay, I don't get as paid as much, but I enjoy helping my clients, and any way I could do that, that's important. And Ken just gave an example. He just saved his client over $100,000. So
You also got to be ready for the answer that is, you know what? Maybe this is not the business you ought to be doing. That's going to save you a lot of money. Sometimes you're best not doing it at all, and I have talked to clients where that wound up being a situation where they were describing what they were trying to do, and the business plan, the business model they're trying to follow, and this thing that the space they're trying to get into. And my advice was like, I'll take this on, but I'm telling you right now, this is never going to work. It's just not going to work. So
I'd like to speak on like the financing part.
Hey, Vic, we're a little past our time.
Oh, so
maybe
really...
we'll have a part 2. I want to give our panelists just one last word, just 15 seconds. One last word, and then we will. We're going to share the recording, and we'll save the chat and share that as well. Go ahead, Meaghan. I'll let you go first.
Well, thanks so much for having me. But this, the second thing I would say is find a designer that you feel good about. Finding a designer is sort of like dating. You have to make sure that that relationship is going to work. So if you don't have a good feeling in your gut about who you're hiring, don't hire them. Hire someone that's going to advocate for you and be really good for your business, and you'll feel it. It's a relationship that you should form that's strong.
Great. Naomi.
You said 15 seconds?
15 to 20 seconds.
Okay. Everyone, you hire the experts for a reason. Do your due diligence. Like Meaghan said, find someone that makes you feel good and that they are qualified experts. And then, respect their craft just as you want someone to respect yours. If you are a wine sommelier and you're looking for an architect, no architect is going to question your ability to tell me about wine. So, and again, you're hiring them for a reason.
Great. Bryan?
yes, thank you. And to Naomi's exact point, I know nothing about wine, but I can help you with design. And I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about wine. And if and I'm hoping for answers that then would influence my design. So that's how that process would go. But thank you for having us, the whole panel, and thank you, Month of Design. Thank you, Karen, for hosting.
Thank you. And Ken?
yeah, thank you, Ken. Yeah, this has been a great panel discussion. I think we got a lot of information out here, and I just leave you with, like I said, no one plans to fail, but a lot of people fail to plan. That's what we're here for.
Great. And Michael, our SpaceLab media partner? Got any?
Just thank you all to our fabulous panel. Just really awesome discussion. And thank you all for the participation. And definitely look out for part 2, because I think that this conversation is not over yet. So thank you all.
Definitely not over. Meaghan Berry of Unsold Studio, Naomi Beasley Porter of the brand new Inspired Design Studio, Kenneth Crutcher of Crutcher Studio, and Bryan Cook of Berardi Partners. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your expertise and the answers to these questions from our business owners. And we look forward to talking with you all again soon. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks.